Cuphead is an incredibly charming boss rush-centric game on Xbox One and PC this week that had me screaming and swearing for hours on end because of its incredibly challenging gameplay, and I loved every single minute of it. Cuphead primarily is a gameplay-driven game, but there is a minor overarching narrative to give a bit of context to the gameplay. You play as a pair of characters named Cuphead and Mugman. One day the two go gambling inside the Devil's Casino, earning a ton of cash on a lucky win streak. In response, the Devil offers the two a deal. If they win a game of dice, they'll get everything inside of the casino, but if they lose, the Devil will take their souls. In a foolish spur of the moment, Cuphead agrees to the terms but then loses, forever being in debt to the Devil. Now in order to free their souls, the two must go around bounty hunter style, collecting all the contracts from all the other people in debt to the Devil. It's a simple story that isn't too much of a focus for the game, but definitely falls in line with the borderline risque stories of cartoons in the 1930s. Cuphead started off as a game that focused solely on boss fights, but later on in development, platform sections were added to the game. However, 80% of this game is still mostly boss fights, so for all intents and purposes, Cuphead is primarily a boss rush game. The game has you playing as Cuphead, though it can be tackled with a teammate that plays as Mugman. As the player, you control your little character that can shoot projectiles, jump, crouch, and dash. Any projectile that's colored in pink can be countered, and that'll earn you a special attack card at the bottom of the screen. The controller scheme is pretty simple and easy enough to understand, at least for most game journalists out there. Now while the controls are easy to get a grasp on, Cuphead's gameplay is challenging, brutally challenging. Now I don't want to scare off any players either, because while it is challenging, it's fair and it's the type of challenge that makes you say, just one more match rather than rage quitting. As the player, you know what you did wrong, what you're supposed to do to defeat the boss, but you have to go through trial and error to execute that plan to a T. It can get incredibly aggravating at times, but in an addicting sort of way that gives you the sense of satisfaction and accomplishment after finally defeating a boss on the 15th try. The fact that the boss's health isn't even shown, but rather you get a progress meter at the end of every attempt, definitely helps fuel that addiction of wanting to try and try again. Each boss has a unique set of attacks that you'll have to figure out in order to properly defeat them. Bosses come in many shapes and sizes, and usually in multiple forms too. While trial and error is definitely part of the process of the boss fights, you'll quickly learn that not every single boss fight attempt is exactly the same. Bosses will switch up the order of their attacks and at times use attacks that you haven't seen in the first 5 attempts. The game challenges the player to think fast and be quick on their feet to react properly to whatever the boss may throw at them. Aside from the bosses, you'll have platforming sections called run and gun stages. These platform stages push the player to run through the level, trying to survive hordes of enemies laid throughout the stage. They're fun and challenging, though definitely not on par with the boss fights scattered throughout the game. They provide a nice short break from the boss fights from time to time, but they're pretty scarce when compared to the number of bosses there are in this game. These run and gun stages also feature coins that you can collect and then use to purchase powers that can be used in other parts of the game. For example, coins can be used to purchase charms that tend to buff one thing and nerf another. There's one charm in particular that will give you an extra heart of health while decreasing your damage in return. You can also purchase new firing types that alter the type of projectiles you'll shoot, and you'll find that different projectiles are better accommodating for certain boss fights. While playing different stages and fighting against bosses, you'll be able to choose the difficulty of the stage or boss, either simple or normal. Playing the game through normal, it took me about 5 to 6 hours to complete the entire thing, while playing in normal, well, that will vary across the player depending on their skill level. For me, it was around 13 to 15 hours filled with challenging and fun gameplay. I don't really have any major gripes with the gameplay other than a few minor nitpicks. For example, at the end of every stage or boss fight, you'll be graded with the letter score, but for some reason there isn't a leaderboard system. It seems like a pretty obvious thing to implement in a game that focuses on playing stages over and over again until you've mastered them. Being a game funded by Microsoft, it's also a little bit weird to see the game not support any form of online co-op via Xbox Live, but it does look like the developers are planning to add it in the future at least. I mean, just look at it, this game looks amazing. I did a preview video of Cuphead I think back in 2014 where I talked to the brothers in charge of the studio behind the game. They spoke to me about how everything was hand-drawn and animated to look just like a cartoon, and that's not really a secret. But the level of detail they put into everything, including the backgrounds, is really impressive. At the time they told me how things that looked like they were in 3D in the background, like the towers, were hand sculpted out of something like styrofoam and then scanned in to be animated like a stop motion picture. The attention to detail and the amount of effort definitely shows in this game's presentation. I particularly really like that even though the game runs at 60 frames per second, things like the background elements run at 24 frames per second to give the elements more of a cartoon feel from the 1930s. It also helps to differentiate your main character with other things going on in the background. Cuphead's visuals are perfectly matched with music you'd find in the classic 1930s cartoons. Trumpets are loud and in charge in all of these tracks with a filter over them to give them this right amount of vintage feel over the beautifully animated visuals. The attention to detail here is incredible. Even in moments where the music is low, you can hear the slight flickering sound of a roll of film being projected. That's not even mentioning the incredible introduction by a barbershop quartet at the start of the game. Cuphead is setting a standard for the levels of high presentation in a video game in all of video game history, not just in 2017. Cuphead is a beautifully presented 2D shooter with some of the most stunning combinations of music and visuals in a video game. Those beautiful aesthetics are accompanied with challenging gameplay that will have you screaming at the TV, followed by moments of cheer and satisfaction when you finally defeat that darn boss that you've been having trouble with. Some players may be turned off by the difficulty level, but I found the challenge to be enduring and addicting. Cuphead definitely gets my recommendation. Whether you're on Xbox One or PC, it's a game I think you have to try out. That's a review of Cuphead for the Xbox One and PC. Ultimately, I'm very happy with how the game came out because I was starting to lose hope for the game after it being delayed for so long and never getting a release date. I'm happy that it finally lived up to my expectations, and it's something I definitely recommend you guys try out. But if you have any questions I may have missed in my review, feel free to ask me in the comment section down below. And if you enjoy this type of content, reviews on Xbox One, PS4, Nintendo Switch, and PC, then please consider subscribing for more content just like that. As always, thank you all very much for watching, and keep on gaming.
Well, Cuphead and his pal Bugman, they like to roll the dice. By chance they came on Devil's Game, and gosh, they played